All right, so we're live, and now let me give my little cue in music.
Okay.
The Guyana Business Journal and the Caribbean Policy Consortium presents Transforming Guyana. In each episode, Dr. Blackman and Dr. Lewis will tackle a different area of interest for transforming Guyana.
Good morning, and welcome to Transforming Guyana, Season 3, Episode 10. Yes, this is the 10th month of the third year of this program, and it's been a labor of love. And today I have an opportunity to speak with someone who has also been engaged in a labor of love, Miss Moriah Hamilton. I am Terrence Blackman, Chair and Associate Professor of Mathematics at Medgar Evers College and the founder of the Guyana Business Journal. And today I want to present an idea for Guyana that I think is one that we can effectively move at this time in our history. And I wanted to start off by providing a bit of the context for my invitation to Moriah for this program. You know, Guyana needs a sort of energy revolution and a tech revolution. And the thing that is challenging us at this moment is that there is a critical skills gap. And I want to give you a quick sense of what the issues are here. What do we need to do in order to transform this nation? What do we need to do in order to address this sort of critical skills gap? And in order, what concretely are the in-demand occupations? What do we need for the technologies that we wrote? And what does the path forward look like? And then we'll invite Moriah to give us a sense of what that path has been. So, for those of you who are coming in for the first time, who are not sure about Guyana and so on. The headline you should take away is that Guyana is expected to be one of the top producing oil and gas economies globally within the decade. Mm-hmm. And this is emerging from the Migration Policy Institute. And I went back just because everyone knows what's happening today. So I wanted just to give a kind of little historical sense in the top. The GDP growth in Guyana in 2020 was 43%, 20% in 2021, and it was around about 50, almost 60% in 2022. If we look through 2019, 2021, direct investment went from about 1.6 billion to 4 billion. And, last year in some conversations I had with some of the folks who do this kind of thing, they're anticipating this gets ramped up to numbers of the order of 30, 40 billion dollars being spent in Guyana. And so, many of you have been noticing President Trump in the Middle East. The projections suggest that Guyana will surpass Kuwait, UAE, and Saudi Arabia in per capita oil production within 5 years. That's happening. That is a reality that we can't escape. And the question for us is, as Guyanese, how do we prepare ourselves for that reality? And in order to prepare ourselves for that reality, we really need to understand that we have a critical skills gap. We have a workforce deficit. The literature reveals that in order to sustain its economic growth, Guyana needs an estimated 160,000 additional workers. And so if we were to harness all our unemployed, underemployed, discouraged employed, domestic supply, that would get us to about roughly 65,000. So you can see that we're at least 100,000 short of where we need to be. Now, in the context of what's actually happening in our country, over 80% of Guyanese working age population has not completed education beyond the secondary level. Only about 3% hold a bachelor's or a master's degree. And 81% of the in-demand oil and gas jobs and the things that are peripheral to the oil and gas sector require some higher technical university education. And so, I'm just repeating what I just said here. We need at least 100,000 workers. About 60% of our active labor force has not received formal education, only completed private education. Less than 10% of our workforce has higher education. So this is a critical workforce challenge that we can't allow. And so, in some sense, the overarching theme of what we want to discuss today is what are some smart ways for us to address this workforce challenge that we're facing. Let me just give a sense of concretely what we're doing. In the oil and gas sector, sort of broadly conceived, we might think about an estimated 500 plus new skilled professionals over the next 5 years. Critical shortage in areas: mining, construction laborers, process plant operators, welders, metal workers, engineering professionals, ship deck crews and related workers. We've had lots of issues around the environmental and health safety specialists. So here are the sort of estimates of what you might need in the various categories. Here's where we are. Only about 50% of these critical skills needed are considered widely available in Guyana. So the technical skills are particularly scarce, and about 62% of the technical skills are really, really hard to source locally. You can see welding and offshore standards, health and safety compliance, vessel operations, project management, data analytics. These are all areas in which we're woefully underprepared for there's a gap between the need and what we can produce and what we have locally. So I also wanted to make note of the technology center. There's a ICT sector vision to position Guyana as a knowledge-based society, which is globally competitive and productive, and having us be established as, rightly, I think, strategically as an ICT hub in the region. There have been initiatives to liberalize telecommunications sector, efforts ongoing to digitally transform the government services. There's a plan, I think, to train about 3,000 people in ICT. There's a movement to provide free internet connections across the regions and to create about 25,000 new jobs. In fact, I want you to see that at 25,000, we're still 1/4 of the 100,000 that we talked about earlier. So the critical thing here is that we have a shortage of skilled professionals, not only in the ICT sector, but also issues of the lack of digital literacy, the advanced technical skills in the workforce. Really limits the capacity of local Guyanese businesses to fully leverage the digital technologies. And I want to acknowledge the government has allocated money to train Guyanese in these areas. But again, we estimate that over this 4-year period, we're probably looking at most about 5,000 people who are expected to be trained and certified. And so the path forward, and this is where Moriah comes into our conversation, is that we need education expansion. We need targeted investments in technical and higher education. And this is the first one. We need, not for the conversation today, but we need sort of managed immigration, kind of structured policies to attract specialized workers. We need, and this is the point of the program, we need some diaspora engagement programs that are concretely bringing back skilled Guyanese professionals to work within the context of the national development of Guyana, and public-private partnerships, industry collaborations on skill development, and most importantly, we need to have a very targeted effort around women in STEM, initiatives that increase women's participation of our girls in technical areas. So that's the path forward, and it's within that context that I've invited kind of a bright light, Miss Moriah Hamilton, who is, I should say, a favorite of mine for a long time. And I think you're probably among the first Guyanese who have been awarded one of the Schwarzman Fellows. And that is an extremely impressive achievement. And,
Thank you.
Start off by congratulating you on that honor. And I know that you, maybe just a few days ago, graduated from Howard University.
I did.
Yeah, yes. And so congratulations from myself and all of the wonderful people who are watching today. And I wanted to start off by asking you, something simple. Tell us where you grew up in Guyana, and what was your community like, and what was your educational experience in Guyana?
Yeah. I would say I had a pretty exciting childhood. Let me start off with Guyanese manners by saying good morning to everyone on the live. And thanking Dr. Blackman for having me here as a guest. I'm super grateful to be in spaces like this that contribute to conversation about growth in the community that has supported me forever. I grew up in Castillo originally, which for most people, if you know Cemetery Road, you'll know Castillo. It's adjacent to Albistown, Castillo housing scheme. And then I moved to Sophia, Field Sophia, and I spent in total about 4 years to 5 years there, in the height of my high school hood. And then from Sophia, I moved to Herstelling, which is next to Moko. So I've solidly lived in, as in more than 2 years, lived in different parts of Guyana. And so it's created a very interesting perspective for me, especially Castillo and Sophia.
Yeah, what would you say is like the particular cultural value or like experience from your upbringing that you think has kind of influenced your path?
Oh yeah, definitely one of culture and community. All three of those areas have very different cultures and very different communities that contributed to how I look at the world. In some places I was considered rich, and then in other places I was considered poor. And so I've always had that very heavy contrast in my upbringing, from where I live to where I go to school, because I went to a private school and went to private schools for most of my schooling. Then I went to a
Who
public.
were some of your teachers there that you remember?
Yes. So it's created a very nuanced perspective of community and then education and also culture in Guyana. And it has greatly influenced how I look at the world. So yeah, I guess it's a little background about where I'm from.
Yeah, who are some of do you remember the names of maybe some of your early teachers in school that you?
Yes, I try not to get into teachers because most of them I wasn't their favorite. But I would shout out Teacher Dacia. I would shout out Miss Faye. I'll shout out Miss Belinda. Yeah, I think those are the most important ones. But yeah, most of my teachers, especially in high school, I was not their favorite. So
I see. Don't worry about that. You're probably their favorite now, and sometimes it's important to have.
maybe we'll
Yeah,
see.
sometimes it's important to have a little bit of antagonism. It pushes you a bit. I
Yeah.
always remember one of my high school professors was, he was a bit of a bully, and I was probably one of the few people who would stand up to him, and I think many that experience of sort of staking out your own ground, I
Hmm.
think is important for young people when they're growing up, and you don't have to worry about that too much.
Yeah.
They've done their job in some sense.
Yeah.
They've taught you the lessons that have moved you forward. Actually, on that note, what specific factors you think led you to choose Howard University? In as you came along that path.
Yeah. Um, More than Howard, I chose to study abroad or study in America in particular because I wanted to be exposed. I wanted to be exposed to a different culture. I wanted to be exposed to different style of learning and to different opportunities that I didn't think that Guyana had at the time at the tertiary level. Um, Howard was special. I really didn't understand the concept of an HBCU while applying for schools. I was just applying to schools that I thought fit what I thought university should look like. And the night before Howard's application closed, my friend sent me and she's like, Mariah, you'd be great for an HBCU. She's like, Howard is so like revolutionary and you kind of fit that status quo. So you should apply to them. And I was like, girl, I'm not a school. But I decided to apply anyways. Um, and I have not regretted it. It has been the most perfect match. Howard definitely has a spirit of revolution, and of change and of advocacy. I mean, Walter Rodney used to come and speak here all the time, and a lot
Yeah,
of other Chinese scholars, so
yeah.
felt definitely felt like home.
I have a slide where I point out that Chetty Jagan was also a student at Howard. Yeah.
Yes, yes, he was.
Uh, yeah, Howard is actually interesting personally for me too. My son is a graduate of Howard, so
Oh,
I have
nice.
I have a very strong affinity for the Bisons. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's also one of the reasons that I invited you. Uh, so maybe one other thought. Your interest in science. Were there any particular experiences in Guyana that sparked this interest? And when you got to Howard, did it change? How did it evolve when you got to Howard?
Yeah. I started off with an interest in science, in particularly physics. I was like a physics junkie. I just loved everything about it. I love that it made sense. I had a really good fun um, physics tutor or teacher, Sir Lee. The real ones know him.
Yeah,
And he does like
I've
this.
heard of him. Yeah,
Yes, he does Goons notes. And so he makes it very for like the common man, for the common people, he makes it very fun and interesting. I think he's one of the best teachers ever in Guyana. And just brings a whole new take to physics.
yeah,
And it really made me fall in love with the subject. I had always been very curious, and physics kind of feeds that curiosity to me more than biology or chemistry. And so I really invested in that curiosity and just kind of followed it up. I used to go to the library and read a lot of physics books, and rework problems, and
yes,
then yes,
yes.
and so
Physics is a very important subject. I mean, I too was. It's interesting. The teacher that I just mentioned, his name was Mr. Insinali. Those folks who were at school with me at the time will remember. He was an excellent physics. He was a bully, but he was an excellent teacher of physics, and I absolutely love physics. I still do to this day. It's one of my kind of secret, pursuit and secret passion. So
nice.
yeah. Let me ask you this. Like what was one of the most surprising aspects of studying at an HBCU for you?
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising aspects is learning about Black culture. Strangely,
Yeah.
I think that Black culture is very minimized by Caribbean people. We're like, oh, like all Americans are like this, or all Americans are like that. And so there's this very like sometimes a very monolithic view of how Black culture is recognized and how it was formed, and you get to learn a lot more about that at an HBCU. It opens up your perspective as to how just the history of this country and how Black people contributed. And it's way past pop culture and the Beyoncés and Chris Browns, but it's very deep rooted in the railroad system, in just a lot of things that has made America what it is. Howard teaches you that, and it's really the mecca for Black excellence.
No, I think that's a very, very important point. You know, the full appreciation of the African American experience, you know, is sometimes lost in the in some of the ways in which this is viewed from a Caribbean perspective, and it's good to immerse oneself in that perspective in order to really fully understand the United States as a country, and its tendencies, and how one ought to conduct oneself in it. So actually, that leads to another question which I wanted to ask you. Like, what would you think was the most challenging adjustment that you had to make when you transitioned from Guyana to the U.S.?
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing for me is the food.
Yeah,
It's just,
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, how do you keep your Guyanese connection? So
yes, that was very
you,
hard for me. I grew up in a hyper culinary environment. My those restaurants is kind of like what kept us going and making food. And to coming here, food was just very different. And my body still has not adjusted. The chicken is kind of like giving me a lot of indigestion. And just a long list of why it just doesn't work for me. And so I started cooking. And now I do like these cooking things on Instagram. Everybody loves them with Guyanese food. So yeah, that was the biggest adjustment for me personally. I was very acclimated to American culture through obviously television and even the school part. There's a lot of YouTube videos that you can watch, and you can feel like if you're almost at the university. But you obviously can't taste through the screen, and so that was a big adjustment for me.
maybe just a follow up. You know, like in what ways is sort of like your perspective as a Guyanese student give you some insights into the academic environment in Howard?
How has it changed, or sorry?
Yeah, like what you know, like coming from Guyana, what did you see? Like what was the insight that you had, you know, seeing through this Guyanese lens?
I learned the insight, I think, is that Guyana is very diverse. And our layers of racism and segregation are very different to the US. I think that was another like very big culture shock for me. I didn't realize how diverse and to some extent unified we were. So yeah, that was another big culture shock, and just being a Guyanese gave me a lot of insight.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that. You know, it's tangential to our conversation today, but that's one of the things that I've been trying to do with this Transforming Guyana is really to communicate that even though, you know, in Guyana sometimes we have this sense of being divided in some ways. We're from a distance, we're much more unified than we appear to ourselves to be when we're at home.
Definitely.
And it's only when we're far away from it and we look at it this way that we can see it probably with a better perspective. So that's something I'll come back to in something future. And I just note that as, you know, some of the unfortunate events are unfolding in Guyana. And let me ask you now to something specific. You know, like what support systems do you think were most valuable for you as an international student?
Yeah. So to come to the US, my mentor and I Patrick Stevens. We did a GoFundMe. We did a fundraising
Pause for a
campaign.
moment. I want to just acknowledge that Patrick Stevens was one of the former presidents of the Queens College alumni here in
Yes.
New York City, and he is a good friend of mine, and who I have a tremendous amount of respect for the work that he's done. Yeah, so continue. I just wanted to note that.
Of course, he deserves all of his flowers. But yeah, Uncle Patrick and I started a fundraising campaign. So it was a local campaign, and then we also put it onto the GoFundMe. And we raised $52,000 in about 3 weeks, which was crazy. And it was, again, a story of unification. I mean, my donors came from all over: taxi drivers, barbershops, insurance companies, every level of the small man to the big man in Guyana. And it really showed like unification. And I think for real, like that's that's how my campaign started. And I think students would appreciate that. Students would appreciate support in those ways. I received so many messages from people from all around Guyana, and I think that we should just invest a little bit more in supporting our students, not just obviously by word, by galang, yo, galang, but also with a 5,000, a 2,000, a 3,000, and much larger sums. Education is very expensive. Especially education abroad. And so that monetary support is very important. But something else that's invaluable is mentorship. Mentorship is so invaluable. I mean, I don't even know if it wasn't for Uncle Patrick, I don't know where it'd be. I'll be somewhere in Guyana in an office, maybe, just being absolutely miserable. But mentorship is so invaluable. And I think that more of our professionals abroad and in diaspora and at home should invest in that, especially in our younger generations. And as for always, back it up with some cash.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of what I want to do in this context, to really, use, the experience that you've had as a kind of opportunity for us to think more importantly and more deeply about the sort of pathways and how we connect our young people to opportunities and the kinds of things that we need to do, and why that is of value to us, right? Because so now I want to go there. Like, what's your vision for giving back to Guyana? Like, are there some, you just mentioned all of these small people, big people, in between people who have contributed to, are there some specific things in Guyana that you think your education can address?
Yeah.
What does your ideal contribution to Guyana look like in the
I think my ideal contribution, I think, looks very threefold. In an academic sense, I hope that I could give back with my contributions to the engineering, the infrastructure in Guyana. We have a lot of large pieces of infrastructure just going down now.
You should just say what your credentials are, so that
yes. Sorry. So I recently graduated as a civil engineer, summa cum laude from Howard University. And I worked largely in the renewable energy sector throughout the 3 years at university, working part-time. And so again, quite a bit of expertise as relates to infrastructure in the renewable sense, in the renewable energy sense. But my specialization at school was in structural engineering. So think roads, bridges, and everything along those lines, even like traffic, and so on, coordination, water engineering, geotechnical engineering. And so I'd like to give back to Guyana in those ways. I think we could use a lot of work in those areas. There's a lot of fast development right now, but I would love to have my, to put a stamp, to have some bit of legacy attached to the development that's going to be happening in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that right now it's a bit shortchanged, that a lot of our development is happening by these large international corporations like CNOC and Exxon, that are invested in companies that are not home based. And so I hope that more young Guyanese get to invest in that development.
Yeah, actually, you made the point more beautifully than I wanted to make it. So just as a, my neighbor back home in Guyana was a guy named Joseph Holder, who was an engineer, and he is the one who's credited with being the builder of the floating bridge. And some of the conversations that I've had, as we've looked at the new structures and so on, has been the complete lack of, Guyanese engineers involved in, the design, the planning, the construction of, and so on. And so I think that we've in a way gone a bit backward there. There are some value for the international efficiency standards, etc.
Definitely.
But I do think that we haven't thought as deeply, and I'm glad you said that, we haven't thought as deeply about how to integrate our own engineering community into these large projects, so that we're not only sort of building new infrastructure, but we're also building locally the capacity to design infrastructure for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to ask one. So, when you mentioned sort of the areas of expertise, I thought, look, this young woman is going to have a global career full of opportunities. How do you see balancing, this global career and the vision for giving back, the commitment to Guyana? How do you see that balance unfolding?
Yeah, I'm hoping that Schwartzman will help me to flesh that out a bit more.
You want to say a little bit about what the Schwartzman is?
Definitely. So Schwartzman Scholars is a global prestigious scholarship/fellowship based at Asia's number one university, and China's number one engineering university, that is focused on global affairs and global leadership. It's gathered 150 scholars from all across the globe on one little subset campus on Xinghua's campus in Beijing to study global affairs and just really analyze our world and its challenges, and what young leaders can do about it. But I think the niche and really special thing is that each scholar gets to represent a particular country. And so I'm representing Guyana. I was chosen to represent Guyana, even though I'm a dual citizen of Guyana and St. Kitts. I was chosen to represent Guyana. And so I get to interact with people from Ukraine and Russia and Venezuela and Colombia and all over the world. And so I think that expertise will give me a good grounding and background as to how I will choose to really mesh my global career with Guyana. I mean, that's what the program is all about. And particularly with China, that has so much investment and so much to do with the scale and really the build of what Guyana will look like in the coming years.
No, well, see, like me, the comments that are coming in are, continue to shine.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Congrats, Moriah, keep rising. Congrats. There are lots of congratulations. So I think I've noted even here, Mentor Patrick has popped in with some congratulations. So the thing I want to ask you is that actually there are twofold. There are two questions. So the substantive question is kind of, what forms of support you think make the biggest difference for a student like yourself, and maybe what do you wish people would understand about this journey of a Guyanese student studying abroad?
Yeah.
So what's the biggest thing that you think, if you said, okay, Terrence Blackman, here's the thing that I think will make the biggest impact on the lives of students in this context, this is what I think it is. And then, you know, speaking to sort of the Guyana context, like, what do you wish people understood more about this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, I think for any international students need support. And I can't shout and scream that loud enough. I've been blessed, extremely blessed to be supported on this journey, but students need support, financial support, moral support, community support. I implore all Guyanese continue not just to cheer on people like me that kind of like reach to the finish line or are getting ahead, but for the people that kind of like fade into the background, that have big dreams and aspirations, that just aren't supported by their families, and by a lot of scholars, by people in business, by other leaders. I think support is very important. Financial support is extremely important. Housing, even in this country, is also very critical. So students need support.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to maybe push you just a little more. Like let's say you were thinking about some. So I have a thought which I want to share after, just as a way to catalyze some more conversation around this. But I prefer hearing from you, like, you know, what sort of, you know, like if you were advising an organization, you will be advising lots of organizations in the future. So you start getting some practice for doing that now. Like you're advising an organization about how to support students from Guyana at Howard University. What would you tell them? What would be like, here, point number 1, point number 2, point number 3?
Yeah. I would say number 1, a scholarship would be great. A scholarship, so monetary support. Number 2, I would say mentorship. Yeah. And yeah, I think those are the top 2 things that students really, really need to be able to succeed here in Guyana. Otherwise, support, moral and financial support is extremely important.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I did not discuss this with you before, so at least I know that I'm not terribly off. Because one of the things, it's an idea since it's been percolating around in the mind since the very early meetings some years ago, like maybe 2022, 2023, and you know, we played around with the wording. We wanted to call it Next Generation Guyana, and the thinking was, and actually it's interesting that you said that, right? So the challenge, we've already been discussing the challenge and the opportunity, and a scholarship program of some sort. And as I was preparing this, so I've already talked about this skills gap, you know, leaving us with a real deficit, and you know, so we have to think about, you know, the ways in which we engage the diaspora, but also the ways in which we target, you know, as I pointed out, how we do a kind of targeted supportive education. And I thought, you know, maybe in your honor, perhaps, or as part of your legacy, this might be something that we could, you know, start within the context of Howard University. And here's where I'm hoping that at some point someone will see this and say that this is a good idea, right? So, you know, Howard, as you rightly is I know, you know, say for example, you might have heard of, say, Karen Abrams, who is the originator of STEAM Guyana. She played basketball at Howard University. She was on. Oh, wow. Yes, she was a bison. So Howard has been a special place for a number of Guyanese, and I, you know, noted here, it's not just even in as much as it's a historically Black college and university. Many Indo-Guyanese have been also students at Howard, and I note here that our former president, Chetty Jagan, was also an alum of Howard University. And when I initially talked about this, there were, you know, what I had in mind was there a concrete way for us to find support for the students who were the Guyanese students who were at Howard University at the time. And, I think your example, well, now you obviously, this idea, it didn't die on the vine, but it got real slow on the vine. And so I think the idea now is to say, well, as part of Moriah's legacy, is there a way for us to start with looking at all of the international students who sit at Howard University, and then try to find some way in which we can support them in terms of some kind of scholarship. And it's interesting that you noted, well, the obvious critical challenge is the one that you've just described. And anyone who's sent a child to college knows this. Without the support, even the best students, risk falling short for graduation. Tuitions are going up. I mean, my own daughter is getting ready to go off to college, and I mean, when you look at the numbers on that page, it scares you. You go right back to bed because you start thinking, how the hell are we going to do this, right? So then this is even so for students who are international students who don't have access to the federal financial, can't fill a FAFSA form and the kinds of things like that. So I think we meaning we of folks who have an interest in Guyana need to think about ways to protect this asset. And there are benefits that come from that. So, as you just recognized, renewable energy, civil engineering expertise that allows for building roads, etc. And when I did ran the numbers, I mean, I think we for an average student, there's a kind of unmet need of about 10,000, 20,000 annually. And I noted, so this slide is a bit wrong, but this was the group who was there. Moriah, there was a young man, Keith Court, there was Aaliyah Anthony. So I think I met yourself and Anthony in Kayla. And there was someone else whose name escapes me now. I know I might have some of the graduation dates wrong. Could you just update us on where these guys are now?
Yeah. They're about, I would say, nine Guyanese students currently at Howard, including myself. I would say including like the graduation class. Keith is at MIT doing his master's. I know that Ali just graduated, and also I just graduated, and Kayla is about to be a senior. Her along with Kayla, Alex. Who else? I think that's about it. And then in the other class, there's Chantel. So it's about 8 to 9 of us.
Okay, good. And so what I wrote this up without sort of your this was my thinking in this regard, but I see we're aligned on this, right? So I thought we would aim for some kind of program which had kind of mentorship and community building. There are a number of really quality Guyanese who run companies, who do sorts of things in the Washington D.C. area. And so to find some formal structure within which we can embed the mentoring and the community building that you talked about. I mean, it's the same lesson that I learned, mentorship and community building. These are the essential ones. I just wanted to see if that was the same, if the lessons had changed for younger people, and some targeted scholarships to close the financial gaps, and some maybe a little bit of steering, if you will. I mean, no one steered you, but I think you've kind of aligned the career with the national development priorities, and then something that is a bit more focused on completion and a return to service, right? So, I mean, not in some way where you're signing a contract, but in a way where you get a chance to fully actualize your potential, so that when you come home to Guyana to be able to do something, you're a fully formed professional. You know what you know what you don't know, and you're not guessing. I think, one of the things that we see quite too often in Guyana is that many of the people who occupy the professional and technical roles are not. They're still guessing too much, and so my sense here of, like, in the past, when I was growing up, if you took a government scholarship, then you signed a contract and you said you have to come home and do for 5 years. And I think that kind of way of doing business is sort of outmoded. I would rather see people like yourself who have a vision to engage in Guyana, be supported with the understanding that you will come. It's like it's the way the cycles work, but you will come when you're prepared. And I suppose these are my four elements of what this thing would look like. Some mentorship and community building to engage the broader diaspora community in some mentorship and community building for students at the universities where they're in the various communities. So you can imagine, like, a Washington D.C. group, New York group, upstate group, where people are intentional about not just randomly saying it, but they're very intentional about doing this kind of thing. And then the question of the targeted support. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I think that the return to service pipeline is so important, not just after graduation or after gaining expertise, but within the college cycle. I mean, students want to talk to other students. That's how they get encouraged. I would say maybe every week, 2 weeks, I speak with students from Guyana. I don't know how they find me.
Yeah. And so you're already doing this. Yes.
Oh yes. Ever since freshman year. I mean, a couple weeks ago I was on a call with one of the top Cape graduators for our country. And he also got accepted to Howard, and we were on the phone for 3 hours, talking, just kind of like discussing what kind of mentorship he would need, who would sign his F1 visa, and trying to help him navigate that cycle. I mean, students come all the time. And so it's so important. Again, mentorship is so important. That might not be like full scale mentorship, but it is in my
right? Yeah.
In my opinion, it is to some extent a return to service.
Yeah.
Because information is of value. Information is priceless. So I mean, even at that scale, at school, I do a lot of, I'm going to say, some level of service to the Guyanese students. Ever since my campaign, the number of Guyanese students here has tripled, quadrupled. Every year we get 3 or 4 new students since I've been here, and most of them found out about it through my story. And of course, it's not giving myself the credit, but it is saying that a lot of students are constantly inspired when other students take risk and are willing to share resources. So,
yeah. But you see, the thing is, what I want is to harden to really build an infrastructure that does exactly what you seem doing, right? So that we have something which can reliably, get our students to Howard, get them the sort of mentoring and the training that they need, get them into the areas of national need, and bring them back home. And we have something like this, which we can do at Howard, and we can do in the City University of New York, which we can do in Massachusetts, which we can do in California, which we can do in Denver, as a way of kind of ensuring that we harness, the full spectrum of our human capital. And it's the thing which I hope, which I'm partnering with you to be a part of your legacy as at Howard University. Let me just say 2 more things. So, I'd gone through the numbers, right? So I'd looked at like what it costs to attend, tuition and fees, housing, living expenses, what you get in the scholarship, and really it's clear that broadly we're looking at about per student about $20,000 that's sort of sitting outside that you have to come up with through your own creative, and you do, but it means that you're probably not, there's some activities that you're not taking on intellectually because you have to figure out how to scramble to ensure that you find these resources in order to continue on.
Definitely.
And yeah, and so what I wanted to pitch to the audience and to the folks here is that, or at least for people who have an interest to, be involved in, maybe convening some conversations around, how do we, establish this is something that perhaps even the government can do, but I'd ideally like to see it be a partnership between people who are private and between the government, because you don't want it to get into the cycle of this kind of political thing which constantly becomes a source of friction. So something where the government is partnered with some private groups within the context of the United States, or more broadly, that really supports future. So you don't have to do anything. The students are already there. As I told you, I actually went to the website and checked to see what is the total number of Guyanese students who are currently in the U.S. who are on F1 visas. And I could be wrong, but the website that I saw said that there were about at most 350, 360. And so one can legitimately track and target each single it's 300 is a finite number. It's not a big number. That one could literally go to every single one of the 300 people there who are Guyanese, who have come to the United States as an international student, who we know will be having some challenges in terms of, some kind of scholarship need, some unmet financial need, who we know will be having some challenges in terms of some mentoring need, and who can contribute to Guyana if we can align the career strategically with some of the national development needs. So that's the rough sketch of the picture in my head. And it's not completely crazy. There is a program very similar to that. There's a model that is done for Jamaicans, where you have a kind of, so Jamaica is always leading us. I don't know when we will start to lead Jamaica, but Jamaica always seems to be a place that is, that is stepping up in ways that we need to step up on. So
and that scholarship is very successful. Most of my Jamaican friends are G1 scholars, and I supported them the full 4 years.
Yeah. So we need to get on the bike and get this moving. So a collaboration between, individuals in the diaspora, businesses in the diaspora, private sector at home, so that every single student doesn't have to do a GoFundMe or put themselves. I think doing a GoFundMe is good, because I think what it does is it teaches you about the value of your own personal agency, right? And the need to broaden the people but at the same time, once you're here, I need you to be able to work. I need you to derive the maximum benefit from the education that is being provided. And I think that as a community, we ought to be thinking about how we support that. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. The hour has gone by, and I am completely still a whole lot of things that I want to say. But let me pause. I want to give you, I want to give you the chance to sort of, give us the benefit of your wisdom as we come to a close.
Sorry, give you the benefit of you.
Give us the benefit of, this thing will be there, will play forever somewhere in the internet, and so, you get to leave some legacy words for the young people in Herstelling, in Sophia, in Costello, how who will watch it at some point.
Yeah, one of the mottos of my campaign was "Dare to Dream." And if we just look at Guyana in a larger context, I'm pretty sure none of us in 2010 or 2009 imagined that this is what our economy would look like or our future would look like. We probably didn't think that we'd have oil and be oil rich soon. And
I hope
so let's just
sooner
make sure that
rather than too soon.
almost
Yeah, sorry, I disrupted you.
definitely almost anything is possible. I mean, having a clean heart and being positive, being very disciplined is so important. And if you dream about it, you could definitely do it. And I'm not just saying that. I'm saying it because it's true. But we definitely need the other scholars. We need the other Guyanese professionals all across the diaspora in Guyana. We need our government. We need the large companies that are using our resources to help us, to invest in us, to support us. So yeah, I think that's about it. I don't really have much more to say because I felt like if I've said the same thing, but
I
again,
think the
support is
most
very
important.
vital, and I'm very thankful for all the support, especially in the comments that I've received over these past 4 years, and I hope that somebody else has an even better story than I do.
Yeah, well, Moriah Hamilton, it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you for joining us today. I think you sort of exemplify the spirit of Guyana in many ways,
Thank you
and
so much.
yeah, and I think that I think you're right. Uh, the former president of Medgar Evers College was a guy named Edison Jackson, and he said in part what you just said, which is that was his call phrase. So you should keep it, dare to dream. He would say, mind conceive it, heart believe it. That way you achieve it. And
Hmm.
so you have to dream it first. And so so I take you, and I'm going to dream a big dream today that we can bring into existence something like the Juan model that Jamaican students benefit from,
I hope
for
so.
for Guyanese students, international students who are at universities all across the United States and more broadly Canada and the world. This is what I would hope that they would then really fully actualize their potential in the global sense, and take some of that global expertise home, and
Yeah.
and do the job that makes us a kind of first world place, rather than constantly fighting with each other over failed infrastructure projects and
Definitely. I can't wait to be a part of it.
yeah, yeah. Again, thank you, and thank the audience for coming in. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm booking now for the 2 years. Is it 2 years in China?
1 year.
1 year? Okay, so I'm booking the conversation now for the 1 year after you graduate from the university in China, and start thinking about what the next step in Mariah's journey will be.
Very
Have a
excited.
good afternoon. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye, everybody.
Take care. That was great.